Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the fantastic short film I'm Not a Robot. I'm joined today by writer and director Victoria Warmerdam and producer Trent. And Victoria, I wanted to start with talking to you a little bit about how you came up with the idea for this, because I know that you were basically on a computer trying to do some of those Captcha tests and failing a few, and had that idea of what if this was how I found out I was a robot. And I was interested in just how that flicker of a humorous thought really led you to then start thinking about the idea of this full narrative and what has ultimately become the film.
Yeah, no, because it's exactly what you said. Like it was just this flicker of thought. Like I was like, oh, but what if I am actually a robot? And I think this idea came to me, I think already 5 years ago or something, because it took us quite some time to actually make this film because COVID happens and we had to postpone the shoot a couple of times. But it's so funny how something like mundane like that can, turn into this, quite dark existential crisis sort of film. And it's I usually drew inspiration from very mundane things like that, and then turn it into something dark and funny. Because I just love to like mix different genres and but keep it relatable at the same time. And when I was writing the script, of course you put a lot of thought in it, and you really have to think about, okay, what is it that I'm actually want to tell with this story? And there were all these like themes and questions coming up, like what does it mean to be human? And I was also very intrigued by this whole sort of question of like, okay, but what if I'm actually a robot and nobody told me? It's like this sort of Truman Show effect of it, like, which is really creepy and that really freaks me out. Like there's always something in the back of my mind, lingering of like, okay, but what if I am, what if the world is not as I thought it was? And I just think that's a really interesting and very creepy question. So that's what I wanted to explore, I think. Yeah.
I love it. And this is, I think, the third time that the two of you have worked together and collaborated on a project. And Trent, I've heard you say that, in working with Victoria, that you very much feel at this point that she can just kind of throw a spark of an idea out, and that as a filmmaker and as a screenwriter that she'll really figure out how to execute it. And so what was that experience for you in working as a producer and just seeing the germination of this initial idea and then how it became this really fleshed out story and character piece?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, when she came with this idea, I started to laugh because I think it's a funny idea, and at the same time, she had the ending in her head. So she was like, okay, this could be the starting point of a film, but at the same time, I kind of know where I want to end. And of course, not everybody has seen the film, so we cannot spoil the ending. But then she was like, okay, this is the ending and this is where we begin. How am I going to go to that ending? And I really liked, and I still like the ending because it's quite dark. But at the same time, I was like, because we already made a couple of short films, and I know Victoria is very good in writing a script and keeping it relatable. But at the same time, I was like, oh, but how is she going to go within 30 minutes from 0 to 100? But of course, she pulled it off. But it's nice to have that confidence in a writer and director.
But it's also nice to get that confidence. Like,
yeah,
we are like, it's all like, we are also a couple, so we know each other quite well. But it's really like, also with your other directors, of course you're not that close with them as you are with me, but you really provide that trust.
Yeah.
Which is, and you were also critical. So when I write a script, I always, we were always brainstorming about it.
Yeah.
And then you read something, and then it goes back and forth, which is really nice because writing a film can be quite lonely in a way. Like, it's a very solitude thing to do. But it's just really encouraging to actually get that trust from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I love that. And it was such a great description of, you know, laughing at the initial idea and finding the humor in that. But then that point of the end of the film kind of does go to like a little bit of a darker place. And, you know, for both of you, I wanted to ask about the tone and the voice of this film, because I think that's what makes it so special is the concept of it is humorous, but yet the way that this central character is kind of traveling through this experience and through this journey is very real and very emotional to her. And so did you want the humor to come more from the concept than the character to be able to play both of those?
Yes, no, that's exactly it. Like I love comedy that is, you know, when it's not, you know, too much on the nose, but a little bit more subtle. And, you know, also in this case, you know, to her, to the main character, this whole journey that she explores, like, am I a robot? That whole question. There's nothing funny about that because it's, you know, it turns into this existential crisis, basically. So of course, the beginning of the film is comedic in a way, also because of that starting point, but it turns darker as you know, progress in the story. And you know, that's also why I'm a huge fan of this actress Ellen Parra, because she has the ability to approach the comedy with such seriousness. And to me, that's the only way to approach comedy, because I think it's even more funnier when the characters and the actors are taking themselves super seriously. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, but I maybe I can add something. I also don't know if that answers your question, but when you were mentioning that, I was thinking that because of course if the actors approach the comedy in a very serious way, the comedy still has to be on paper. And what I really like about, and that kind of is something extra to your previous question, what I really like about Victoria is that she writes the comedy on paper, but it's not like this situation comedy, laugh out loud comedy. And if the actors approach it seriously, then it becomes comedic. And that's what I really like, because these actors that she chooses, for instance, Ellen, that's an actor she already wanted to work with. And when she had the idea and only like 10 pages of this will be the story, we approached her and we asked her, do you want to be the main lead actress in this short film? We didn't even have a script yet. So Victoria could write it, sorry, my grammar is not that good, could write it specifically for her. And that really helped, because when she writes it, she can think of how is Ellen going to approach this, how's she going to do it. And yeah, it's a very human aspect of the film. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
It's such a great gift to have that in terms of already knowing her as an actress. And Victoria, what are some of the elements that you feel like you ended up writing into the character of Lara because you were writing it with Ellen already in mind as your lead actress?
oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I knew already that her timing is super good. So that was something I was like, I think because this is also how I approach it with other actors in my films. Like I just sort of like hear them talking, and that's even before I see images. Like I can hear them talk, and like, because you know, of course, the whole thing about actors is that they can transform to, you know, whatever character you want, but I think characters always have, or actors always have, this specific thing that they're really good at. So I'm really trying to use that, and I think in Ellen's case it was the timing, her timing. And yeah, there's also some like understated, dry tone to her acting. And I think she's this good because she can do comedy, but she can also do drama. And that was what I was really looking for in this film, because my previous two shorts were a little bit more comedy. And I really wanted to add a little drama into this short just to challenge myself as well, because I'm super comfortable with comedy, but you know, it's nice to explore other things, and also for me to improve as a filmmaker. So yeah, I immediately felt safe with her, knowing that she has this whole range that she can use. So yeah.
And the concept of the film is the idea that there are people who are robots that are existing, but they're completely humanistic and passing to the point where they wouldn't even realize if they are or aren't. And that's obviously one of the questions at the center of the narrative. And how did that idea shape a lot of the choices that you both were making creatively? Because it's even things like, does a robot bleed or do they not? There's all these things that, still just feel very humanistic to the way that they are portrayed within this society that you've created in the film.
Yeah, correct. No, yeah, I was looking for this human approach because I think, always also to sort of humanize robots in a way, because okay, AI is freaking me out a little bit, but I think we have to fear the humans behind it rather than the robots itself. So I really wanted to, portray the robots in this world as like very human characters. They are almost even more human than the humans. And I think that was also an inspiration to like the whole aesthetics of this world, because we drew inspiration from this nostalgia for vintage and retro design, because I think that's also a very human thing to do. Like we always longing for the past, and also in our nowadays design, like a lot of people are into vintage and retro and this like sort of, instead of the whole like very clean sci-fi aesthetics. So yeah, that human approach was really a theme in developing the whole aesthetics of the film, basically. And that was also why we decided to shoot on film, because when I was talking about this with my DP, Martijn van Broekhuizen, he immediately said, oh, but maybe we can shoot it on film, which is, that's what all the DPs want, basically. Yeah. But I think in this case, it really made sense because, that's working on film, that human craftsmanship, like, of course, it matched with the aesthetics of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s that we were going for. But also that human craftsmanship of working on film, that really ties into that human approach. Yeah.
But also because you were talking about the world, and of course we brainstormed a lot about the world, because if this world exists where robots are living among humans and they are indistinguishable.
Yeah, and some of them don't know because they are
exactly
part of the human experience.
Exactly. Some of the bots do know, and other bots do not know whether they're a bot or not. But if they do not know, well, even if they do know, and if they are indistinguishable, they should bleed. And they should be exactly the same as humans. Of course, we don't know exactly how this technically will work, but that doesn't matter because it's just in this world where you have to make it believable, which was really interesting because the character, of course, in the film, she smokes, she vomits, and she also has like, probably nobody sees this, but she's also wounded in the film because she has like a small plaster on her finger. You only see it like once or twice, but these small things, it was everything we wanted to make her as human as possible. Yeah. In every way.
I also love how, it's a very specific story to this character, but there's all these kind of little elements of larger themes and larger societal topics that are at play. So even the fact that, it's mostly men who are procuring these robots, and obviously they would have to be a little bit wealthier, or someone comes in for a job interview at Lara's company and there's a conversation about representation and diversity within the company. And so how did you want to kind of interlace these little conversations and topics that are quite big discussions as these little touch points throughout the story to really be representative of this society that you were building in the film as well?
Yeah, I think it came very organically because when you start to think about, okay, what does it mean to be a robot in this world, you automatically connect it to like society right now,
and minorities
because in the film, and I think that didn't make the script, but there was also in some version there was something about the bot community, and there was some sort of like coming out video of a famous bot. So I think that's also the interesting thing, with genre films and especially with sci-fi, it can tell so much about society right now. So that's why I sort of interlaced all these little things, like topics about diversity, but also autonomy for women. And I think that was also the challenge, to not do that like too much in your face. But yeah, I'm really glad you picked it up. Yeah.
But it was also, since I've worked with Victoria a couple of times, I know that even if it starts out as a joke, of course, she as a person, she cares about this world. She cares about feminism. She cares about equality. She doesn't like to be gaslit, stuff like that. She wants to say something about labels. So when she starts writing, we both know that these themes, they will come in organically in the dialogue or in the person. So the film is also about feminism and inequality and about the patriarchy and all that stuff. But it's not just a film about that. It kind of occurs organically in the film, in the script.
Yeah, and I think a mixed genre film like this, could be the perfect vehicle for that, because it's not in your face. It's not like an activistic. I don't know if activistic is a word, but it's not super in your face, and that makes it perfect, to tell it in this way. I think with a little bit of humor and
and it's
likeness to it.
Yeah, it's entertaining, but at the same time, hopefully it's thought-provoking, and people, after they've seen the film, they start to think about these topics or start to talk about them. Yeah, but they should also be entertained.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about the music, because you have this mix of music composition, but then the film also is bookended at the beginning and the end with a Belgian choir who are performing a cover of Radiohead's Creep. And I love the way that the lyrics kind of give this very different meaning at the beginning to the end. And I know that one of your Belgian co-producers on the film helped with getting the rights to it from the performance choir and from Radiohead's music representatives. How did you want to use that song to kind of really have these two different moments and these two different touch points in the film?
Yeah, I think when I was writing the script, I think I was listening to that song and I was like, oh my God, this is like, it's funny when you're writing a film, you're suddenly sort of connecting, like everything around you is sort of connected to your film in that moment. It's like a very narcissistic process. So I was listening to that song and I was like, oh, this is too perfect. And I know that song is used a lot in film, but sometimes when it fits, it fits. So I decided to use it, and then at the ending I thought, okay, but yeah, it's too perfect to not use it, sort of mirror that song in the ending. So before, when I was writing the script, I think you already
tried to get
to get those rights, because it was too perfect for and I'm really glad that we managed to get those rights. And at the same time, we were looking for like the score of the film to sort of complement that song in a way. And when I was writing the script, I was already working with the composer, Merlijn Snitker, because in my previous shorts, the dialogue was a very prominent part of the film. And then when you work with the composer afterwards in the post, there was not much room for the score. So now I decided to work with him beforehand. So he was writing the music, I was writing the script, and we could really like go back and forth and like really inspire each other. Yeah.
I love it. Trent, I also wanted to ask you about how the use of location really helped in terms of this story and this film coming together, because what's so clever is the fact that you really have two locations. So over a 7-day shoot, there was 5 days, I believe, shooting in the office space and 2 days shooting in a parking garage that was a separate location, but in the story, it's all one space. But I love how much we move between different areas of the office space. So even though you've kind of confined the film to 2 locations, it really feels like it's spans and moves a lot within all of the scenes. And I was interested from a producing standpoint how having 2 singular locations really helped, but how also the scope of the story really allowed us to feel like we're moving into different spaces.
Yeah, that's a very good question, but I think it's to be honest, it just comes from the script, of course. And all these locations were already mentioned in the script. And then, of course, when you have the script, you start to look for a location. And since we were doing this as a Belgium co-production, it was for us interesting to shoot it in Belgium. But it was not just for the money, but also for the look, because the buildings in Belgium, they do look better, especially for this film, than in the Netherlands. So we found this building in Brussels, the location scout. Of course, Victoria wrote like a location resume. I'm looking for kind of this Art Nouveau, organic, Art Deco. She even wrote the colors in it and a lot of plans, you know, a lot of. So, and then the scout came with this location, this office building, which we shot all the office parts, interior office parts in. And it was perfect. It was just his way of getting a location that Victoria wanted. And we were like, oh, this is great, let's do it. And he said, no, I'm just showing it for reference because it's way too expensive. There's US series shooting in there for like $15,000 to $20,000 per day. And we were like, oh yeah, that's way too expensive for a short film. So then, but it was a wonderful reference.
Yes, it was really hard because, you know, when you see that building, even in pictures, you immediately fall in love with it. And it's really hard to, you know.
So want to live there. But then he started to look for other buildings which were kind of similar and which were affordable. And then we were like a couple of weeks later, and he has shown us like 5 or 6 other buildings, and we were like, yeah, it's nice, but it's not the magic of the building that we saw. And I asked him, I said, can't you ask them, because we're not a big US series, we're a short film, maybe there's something to negotiate with. He said, yeah, of course, I can always ask them. He did ask them, and they were quite flexible. They said, oh, it's for a short film. And then the price went down enormously. It was still expensive for our film, but then it went down so much. We were like, okay, we still have to shoot 5 days. It will be a big part of our budget, but it's worth it. So then I was talking to Victoria, and we were looking at the budget and say, okay, how can we make it work in order to shoot in that building? Because the building, it gave us everything.
And especially when you're shooting on one location, or you have
it has to be perfect.
It has to be perfect, because it's almost like a character itself, that building.
Yeah.
And I think when we were looking for that parking deck, I think that was also a big challenge, because, you know, when you have seen the film and you know the ending, you know why people are not like super excited to you know,
to shoot there.
To have that, you know, this is a bit fake, but when you've seen the film, you know why.
Yeah.
So that was quite a challenge. And
also it was practical, because the building that we were shooting at, it doesn't have a parking deck.
No.
It just has a roof. It doesn't have a parking deck. So we knew we had to find a parking deck at another place. Yeah. But it had to match the building with the view through the window. You know, there had to be trees in the back and stuff like that. Yeah. And then we found it ourselves while we were having a screening of a short film in Leuven, which is also in Belgium. And there's a wonderful film festival there, where in the end we also viewed I'm Not a Robot. But we were driving there, and then Victoria said, oh, maybe we should look at that building there, because it looks like a parking deck and it could be interesting for a film. So we just went there, and we went up, and we were like, this is fantastic. And then we sent it to our location scout, and he got in touch with the people from the university. And it all turned out that it was possible. So it was kind of a lucky shot that we found it. Yeah, just by accident. Yeah.
It's so great when it works out that way. Victoria, one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about was the choice of Lara's profession in the film, because I think whenever there's any sort of concept of robots or technology in that way, the idea is always, oh, you know, this is for operational jobs or manufacturing or some sort of weapon usage. And, you know, we have Lara questioning whether she could be a robot or whether she's not, but she's in a very creative job where she has a lot of autonomy and kind of self-thought. And I was really curious about what led to that specific choice for you.
Yeah, well, you know, it was exactly that. Like, I was thinking, okay, but what if she is actually creative? Because that's also the whole danger of AI, I think, now for all the creative jobs in the world, you know. Also, like, I'm also worried about, like, okay, what if you at some point ask ChatGPT, okay, could you write a Victoria Warmerdam film? And then they just, you know, that's, you know,
they have this brilliant script.
Yeah, that's such a terrifying idea. So I think, you know, I thought it was interesting to make her this music producer and give her that creativity also, because it's not, you know, I think when you are a creative like that, you know, it's not the first thing that comes up in your mind that like, am I actually a robot, because it's such a human thing, like such a human profession. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you both a little bit about the ending of the film, stepping into some of the spoiler territory for it, because it executes so well. And I love the way that the camera, you know, just stays on that single shot at the end. And I imagine that there was so much riding on getting the stunt work going into that right. And, you know, again, even just that choice of, you know, does Lara bleed? Does she not bleed? You know, and all of those sorts of things. And so I was just very curious about, you know, creatively, what were some of the conversations and what were some of the logistics that went into executing that, so that from a stunt perspective it works, but also from a character perspective that it works as an ending as well.
Does it make sense to say to people who are listening this that if we, because it's very difficult to talk about this, especially also the creative choices, without spoiling anything.
Yeah.
So maybe if people haven't seen the film, then they should see the film first and then look at our upcoming answer, maybe.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Like, if you haven't seen the film, this is the cue. Your cue to pause this interview and watch the film, and then, you know, then we can just freely talk.
Then we can just freely talk about it. Otherwise, it will be very, very fake. I think.
Yes.
So we're getting into specifics,
Yes.
but please watch the film first.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna spoil now.
Yes.
So at the end of the film, she is jumping off the building. And I always, like what Trent said before, when I wrote the script, I had this image in mind of her like jumping off that building and, you know, laying on the ground.
But doing it in one shot.
And do it in one shot, because I thought that was just the strongest way to tell it, to really make that impact, like literally. But that was really hard actually to pull off, because of course when we are not shooting it in one shot, because you have to switch to the stunt double, and, you know, there's a lot of technical and a lot of stunts, you know, things going on. So we had this plan to well, basically, so she's running. When she starts running, at some point her partner Daniel is yelling at her, and then we pan back with the camera, and when we pan back to her, that's the moment when we cut, and then the stunt woman is taking over, and she has cables. She's attached to cables, and she has this short amount of space to actually run and you know, make some speed, and then she goes up the railing, and when she looks back, there's a face replacement with the real actress, also to pull it off like that, so you really feel it's the same person jumping off the building. Because it was funny, because it was my first time doing a stunt, and I was really nervous about, you know, the believability of it. And, you know, the stunt woman is like, I think, like, quite a
she's like 20-30 centimeters
smaller than the actress. So I was like, okay, we really
people come to see it.
Yeah, we really need that face replacement. And then she's jumping off the building, and just before she hit the ground, you know, of course she is just hanging a little bit.
She's stopped by the gates.
Stopped, yeah. But when you look at that at the monitor, it's already so scary, because you really, like, I'm afraid of heights. So when I was looking at the monitor, I was already feeling that, okay, oh my God, she's going to.
That was a good thing.
Yeah, that was really good.
That was a good thing on set.
And then to make it work, we had to shoot a plate of her actually falling for that last couple of inches. And then we stitched that together.
And then visual effects cleaned all the cables. And
yeah, but it was really nerve-wracking, because, you know, it was my first time doing a stunt, so I really had to trust everyone around me, you know, and everyone was saying, oh no, but it's going to work. But you're still like, okay, but what if it doesn't work? Like, if this shot doesn't work, I don't have a film. So that was really nerve-wracking, you know, even in the post-production when. But
at the same time, it's quite a bold choice, because from the beginning, Victoria was like, I want this in one shot. And when she was saying that, I immediately saw it. I was like, yeah, that's a great idea to have it in one shot, because that will be the most impactful way to shoot it. And then, of course, we were like, people were saying, oh yeah, but it's quite difficult in one shot. Yeah, hope it's going to work in the visual effects. And you have, like Victoria said, you have to trust people. And at one time, or a few times, people were saying, oh, but can't you shoot it in a couple of shots, you know, as a backup? And I was like, of course you can. But I was really like, no, but this is what Victoria's idea was. And I really think it's the best idea for the film. So we just have to make it work. There was no compromise at all in the final shot. And even when the visual effects, I mean, when they were doing it, because they had to stitch all those 5-6 shots together to make it look like one shot. And then the visual effects guys, they showed the shot to us, and it was like, when visual effects guys show you something, it's around at 80%. But visual effects at 80%, it doesn't work. So we saw it and we were like, it doesn't work yet. They said, yeah, but at 100% it will work. But you still have to trust people. And at the same time, we were editing. And even when we finished editing, we had the visual effects shot in the editing for 90%. But it didn't work. You have to trust them. Yeah, no, but it will be fine. So we locked the edit, hoping that the visual effects shot will work. And then when it becomes 98%, you're like, oh yeah, this could work. But then you have to get really into specifics, the way that she falls on the ground in the end, that part, and how her arm is moved and stuff like that, and whatever you see and what the sound will be, all those small things make it impactful and make it believable. But that's really getting into specific. It was really difficult, but I think we pulled it off in the end.
Yeah, and I think from like a story perspective, why I wanted to do it in or seemingly one shot, I really wanted to stay with her in that moment, because it's what you were saying earlier, it's quite a big jump, literally, from like the beginning, which is very like little bit of comedy and very mundane, to go to that place like in 22 minutes. So I just really wanted to stay with her literally at the ending and make that work. Yeah.
No, it's so great, and it really, really comes together and is a wonderful ending. So congratulations on the film, and I'm so excited that you're already developing this into a feature version, and look forward to watching that in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this interview.